Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get started. It is 12 o'clock on the East Coast. So a couple of housekeeping details. If you'd like to tweet, please use the handle @AHA Media Group. You can ask questions in that handy dandy QA box. We will answer them at the end. And then, like all of our other webinars, if we don't have time to get to them, I will email you separately. You will receive access to a recording of this webinar. As marketers, you're probably like, oh, another survey, Hava. But please, it's only 5 questions, and it does help us answer the question of if the webinar was valuable to you. And it also gives you an opportunity to tell us about other topics that you might like us to cover in the future. So if you could please answer that survey, literally it'll take you 3 minutes, if that. So I had so much fun preparing this webinar. I am actually a mom. I have 3 children. And it was really interesting for me to tackle this question of how do people relate to healthcare content when they're talking about dealing with their children? And is it all about the mothers, or have non-traditional families, grandparents, do kids and teens, how do they react with healthcare content? So it was really fun to put it together, and I'm excited to show you what we found. I just want to take a minute though, if you're on this webinar, you're dedicated to healthcare and helping people make important decisions, which we are as well. And so I really thank you for the time that you take. I've been in this industry for 15 years. I know how hard your jobs are, how many directions you're pulled in, how many political battles you get ensnared in. So thank you very much for all that you do. Just a little bit about AHA Media Group. We are a content strategy and content creation consultancy. So we do all the content strategy, editorial toolkits. We do voice and tone, personas work, all of that good stuff, competitive gap analyses that help you make really great decisions about your content strategy. We also do copywriting, conditions and treatments pages, service lines, blogs, social media. If it's written, we do it. And then we also train those who are interested in getting better at becoming great healthcare content creators. We are in the business, just like you are, of helping people make the most important decisions of their lives. And one of the things I learned in putting this webinar together was how critical we really are to helping people make these decisions and educating themselves about what it is they need to know to feel more confident navigating a complex healthcare situation. So let's begin and talk about some of your challenges. So there is so much parenting content out there on the web, and there are all these websites that parents can go to look for information about their kids. Even the New York Times jumped into it because it's such a popular topic right now. And then you have smaller publishing outlets with niche markets who have published blogs, who publish pins on Pinterest, who gather information from different parts of the web and curate it for different kinds of parents. And so as healthcare marketers, we really are in a very competitive landscape when we're talking about creating pediatric content. And so I just want to take us on the journey of 2 stories about parents who dealt with not the most complex situation, but definitely things that happen to people pretty regularly throughout the country. So this is Sammy and his mom. Sammy's a 10-year-old boy, and he's bedwetting. He's still bedwetting. It happens occasionally. It doesn't happen every night, but it's something that they're both really concerned about. And so Sammy's mom goes to the web and she types in bedwetting. And the great thing about Google, although when you're searching for something and Google is not being helpful, it can be frustrating, but the helpful part of Google is that when you start typing, it's going to suggest other things that people look for when you're looking for that particular topic. And so she sees bedwetting at age 10 and she clicks on that. One thing to note is that this is searching done on my computer. Google must think I have everything wrong with me that you can possibly have, but it's going to show me results for me based on my search history. So you could type in the same thing and find some different things. The important thing to remember though is that this is pretty much what the search results look like. So Sammy's mom is looking and she's looking at all these ads. She may not click on them because we know a lot of users bypass those ads. But she may come to this WebMD article about what's causing my child to wet the bed. And then she may also see some structured content from a site out of the UK about what the causes of bedwetting are, a little bit more about maybe he has an overactive bladder. And then she continues to see articles about what her problem is. Now, what's going to catch her eye is still bedwetting at 10 years old, because that's how human beings process from the neuroscience perspective what they're looking for. In their head, they have a phrase, and the phrase or the question that closely matches up with what they're looking for is where they're most probably going to click. So she's looking at still bedwetting at 10 years old, and it's really an article from a very long time ago. It's kind of tone deaf. The question isn't really about still bedwetting at 10 years old. It has a heart hormones issue composed of it, and the answer isn't really that great. Nationwide Children's, which she will find on a later search, does a really great job of educating Sammy's mom about what's going on in terms of bedwetting. I just want to say for the future of this webinar, if I show an example and that example is from a client of AHA Media Groups, you'll see a star in the upper right-hand corner. So they do a really excellent job of educating Sammy's mom. Now, Sammy is 10 and he's a digital native, and Sammy knows how to use the web. I have an 11-year-old boy. He knows how to search the web better than I do. And he's not going to use the phrase bedwetting because Sammy's 10 and that's not the vocabulary that Sammy has. What Sammy's going to type in is, I wet the bed. And what Google is going to turn up is, I wet the bed at 25, I wet the bed at 16, I wet the bed at my friend's house, I wet the bed sometimes. Hopefully Sammy is not wetting the bed when he drinks alcohol or sleeps in a hotel. But the last one, I wet the bed, what do I do, might be something that he looks at. What's Sammy eventually going to land on? And this is why Google surfaces all different types of content formats when people are searching. Sammy's going to be interested in these videos because they're going to speak to the way that he gets information from the world. And he's probably going to watch these videos. Will he click on the people also ask boxes? Probably he might, but chances are he's going to watch this video about, I'm 13 and I still wet my bed. So when we look at the questions that Sammy and his mom come to the web, they're triggered by these questions and they're looking for this information, they line up really closely. Sammy's asking, am I normal? How do I stop doing this? There's shame around it, right? Does anyone else know? Should I talk to my mom about it? Like, what do I do? Then Sammy's mom is thinking, like, is this normal? Isn't it normal? Because as parents, we have more perspective. So maybe bedwetting at 10 years old is normal for some kids. She's thinking to herself, what do I do? When do I call the doctor? Also, she probably wants advice on how to talk to Sammy because she doesn't want Sammy to feel shame or for his self-esteem to be impacted by this. And she's asking herself again, what do I do? What's the best thing for my child? Let's look at Becky. So Becky is a classic 16-year-old who, unfortunately, because of different pressures, has developed somewhat of an eating disorder. And Becky's mom is really freaked out. She sees Becky losing a lot of weight, and she's nervous about what potentially is going on with Becky and her relationship with food. So she's going to type in eating disorder, and she's going to get some results right away. And chances are that she's going to click on one of the first 2 to 3 links. What she finds here is something called eating disorders, which is like a lot of words coming at you at once. The red font doesn't help, and there's a lot of information here, and she may bounce off the page really quickly because it's not coming at it from the perspective of what she's trying to do, which is gain information to educate herself to figure out what to do next. She might wander into an association that sort of caters to professionals. And she may also find some articles that do help her sort of create a knowledge base for herself around what it is she needs to know to do to help Becky. Becky is not going to type in eating disorders. Chances are Becky is going to type in something like, I think I have an eating disorder. And she's going to see all of these different things that hopefully makes her feel pretty normal quickly because so many other people are searching for these issues. And what Google returns, or what the search engines are going to return to a different phrase like, I think I have an eating disorder, what do I do, is very different than what it's going to return to just eating disorders. And that's an important thing for us to think about as content creators. No matter what type of content we are writing, we want to make sure that we're using the phrases that all of our audiences use. And that's why it's so important to do that keyword research and that audience research and make sure that we're braiding it into our content. Now, Becky's probably going to go to YouTube because YouTube is an important part of where she hangs out, and she might type in eating disorders there, and she may find some videos. And she's probably going to hit Instagram because they love to hang out there. And so when she types in eating disorders in Instagram, again, she's going to find a lot of memes. Some of them are healthy. I love this one. When you look at this one, it's talking about emotional eating, and it shows the ice cream with "I hate him." It's like it comes along with it. And then she's going to find some professional organizations, and she's not necessarily going to find a lot of information about what it is that she can do about her eating disorder. She's in a gathering stage. Now she's on Snapchat because she hangs out on Snapchat probably the most, except for TikTok. And what she finds on Snapchat is a lot of information about Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift just released this documentary on Netflix called Miss Americana. And she talks a lot about how she struggles with this as well. So she's going to find that news, and she may find other people who talk about eating disorders. And here is a video that she found on TikTok about eating disorders. But I miss you more. Okay, so we can see that Becky is looking for information on all of the different channels that she hangs out on, but no one has really given her clear information about what the next step is. Eventually, Becky and her mom may stumble into care that they can find, places that show them that this is a kind of place that Becky would go to. This imagery is very important because it orients Becky and her mother to, we're in the right place. This is a appropriate place for us to look for information about what to do next. Shepherd Pratt does a really beautiful job of this. Right here, they tell you right away, these are the people we take care of. This is the kind of services we offer, and payment is incredibly important as well. Because when we look at the questions that Becky and her mother have, Becky is thinking, like, what's really wrong with me? Like, what's going on? Particularly if her friends are sort of doing the same behaviors, it may seem normal for her. She's asking the same question, what do I do? How do I handle this? Maybe I can handle it on my own. Teenagers, you know, want to have independence and they have a lot of privacy. And then when should I tell my parents? Like, should I tell them now? Should I try to maintain it on my own? And then Becky's mom is like, what is going on, right? She just wants to get a handle on this. She wants to talk to Becky about it in a way that isn't going to scare Becky or make Becky turtle up, you know, and hide her feelings. She wants to know, where is the best place for me to get treatment? When should I call my pediatrician? Are we going to be able to afford this? I know eating disorder centers can be extremely expensive. So I think that these, when we see, again, Sammy and his mom and Becky and her mom, what we really see here is that both sets of people are really asking and driving towards the question, what should I do? What do we do? They come to the web because they want to educate themselves and they want to feel like there's a brand that they can connect to, but they want to be told, how do I handle this problem? And so we have three jobs as healthcare marketers in the pediatric space. The first is it's our job to educate people. And the reason I use the atom as the icon is because I think very often people feel chaotic when they have a health situation. They have to learn about it. They have to gather information. Sometimes it's shameful. They don't want to talk to friends about it. It's hard to say to a good friend who might be friends with, who might have a son Sammy's age, does your son wet the bed? These can be difficult things, particularly if people don't feel close to those age groups and those other parents. So our first job is to educate them. Obviously, we have to build trust with them immediately, and that's about having empathetic content that speaks immediately to their needs. And then I think the thing that we don't always do a great job at, although I'm going to show you some fantastic examples, is connecting the dots for people on what to do next. So very often we'll say, call us, and that's fantastic, but giving people sometimes more actionable information helps them in their minds think, okay, they're telling me what to do. That's a meta message that when I go in for treatment and when I go for consultation, the doctors are going to treat me with the same respect and the same way. So let's talk about how we educate parents about what's going on. So here are some good examples. I think Children's Hospital Colorado does an excellent job of explaining to parents why it's important to see a pediatric specialist. It's not always clear. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I recently asked my pediatrician, like, can she see an adult doctor? And so the question always becomes, and it turns out pediatricians see people until they're 21. So I just gave you the quick answer. But it's really important for us as pediatric healthcare marketers to explain to parents why it's so important to come to a pediatric institution and what pediatricians bring to the treatment mix that could be different than, let's say, a doctor who typically treats adults. Hopkins All Children's Hospital does a great job. Again, the parent is gathering information about scoliosis. They want to know, is this normal? Where's the best place to go? They're trying to explain to people what they need to know in order to make a decision. I think CHLA does a really nice job here of mixing their marketing, their calls to action, and telling people what to do. You can see that at the top, they sort of have their marketing information about why you'd want to come to CHLA. At the bottom in the accordion, they kind of explain the different things that parents would want to know. And then in the right rail, they give people the information that they need to contact us and where they might be able to find that treatment. So that's a nice example of educating people about what your program brings to the table and also educating them so they feel informed and empowered to make a decision. How do we build trust? This is, I think, the number one thing that we talk about all the time is how do we make patients feel like they're in the right place? So one of the things that we talked about is orienting them with pictures that look like the people that they are. But the other part of it is giving people. So here's a great example from Cincinnati Children's. I think one of the nice things that they do here is that they give a date and they tell you who wrote the article. Now, we all know that Ian Windmill probably did not write this article. Either a writer there or an outsourced content firm wrote this article, but they used Ian Windmill as the subject matter expert to get that information. And so just putting his name there automatically creates trust with the person reading this. Now, don't panic. Not every piece of content you need to have an SME's name on. I wouldn't always say that that's a good idea anyway. But what I will say is that there are certain places, particularly in blog posts, where I do think that it is very valuable to be able to say this was written by somebody to encourage trust with the person reading it. You can also just put a quote from the subject matter expert in the blog post or in the article. I think it does the exact same thing. Children's Hospital of Atlanta does a really nice job of using numbers to prop up trust. So people love to see numbers. Anyone who is trained as a journalist knows we can't make claims unless we can give people facts that support those claims. That's what we call flabby content here at AHA Media Group. When we read stuff and it's like, yeah, I don't know if you can really say something like this, you need to back it up. So here they do a great job. They do more than 6,000 ear tube surgeries each year. That's a lot of ear tube surgeries, and that's something that I might feel comfortable with knowing if I'm bringing my child in for ear tube surgery. And then what they also do, which I think is really nice, is they connect Ainsley's story with this. So, you know, they say really clearly when a 1-year-old needed ear tubes, her parents turned to Children's. And so they back up this claim of we do 6,000 a year, we're the place to come, with an actual story that can illustrate why it's such a great place to go. Another thing that I think is useful to use is to talk about awards or how you're nationally recognized. So I think that Utah Valley Pediatrics does this nicely when they talk about the 30 board certified pediatricians. They talk about the nationally recognized quality that they have. And then again, that payment issue that people are thinking about. Does my insurance cover this? Am I going to be able to find the things that I'm looking for? So they do a good job of answering those questions immediately so that people feel good about calling and making an appointment. The next thing that we want to do, and this is what I talked about, so we want to educate people, we want to build trust. I think the next thing we really need to try to do is give them actionable content that they can walk away with and feel good about. So Children's National Medical Center does a really nice job of this when we talk about the flu and flu prevention tips. Again, in an accordion, they show what you need to do in order to make sure that your family is protected from the flu. And I think that's a nice thing that they give people this information so they can feel like, okay, I can check off that, I can check off that, I can check off that. I love this one, like remember your kid's first visit to the dentist, or maybe you haven't gotten there yet, but it's definitely something that you're like, especially if you don't like the dentist yourself. And so Stanford Children's does a really nice job of explaining what parents need to be thinking about and how to prepare their child. Kaiser Permanente, when I was doing the searching on bedwetting for Sammy's story, I think they do something so brilliant here. They talk about exactly the steps. Everyone feels better when they have a plan. And so here it's like, get the facts, compare options, your feelings, your decision. And as you click on each of these numbers, the content appears below to explain to you what that, if it's your decision, they're explaining what you need to be thinking about. So I just think this is a fantastic way to sort of think about how do we connect the dots for people when we're giving them the information that they need. Now let's talk about audiences, because I know that, looking at, okay, we need to educate people, we need to make sure that they trust us, and we need to give them actionable information. Well, that's great, but we can't really create great content unless we truly understand our audiences. And since this webinar is titled, Is It All About the Moms? Let's talk about who the different audiences are that you might be talking to. So let's talk about millennial moms. So these parents parent hard. I mean, they really have taken parenting to a new level. They were born between 1981 and 1997. They are the largest living generation. 30% of them are parents, and they were 90% of the new moms in 2014 and 2015. Now, if we believe that 80% of all healthcare decisions are made by women, and I've heard that stat even has gone up since that research was, well, that actually research is faulty. It's not really based on anything real. But I've heard clients tell us that in their research, they found it's even up to 90. Then we know that this woman is a very important woman for us to gain trust with. I found this great report from Baby Center on the 21st century mom, what her mobile and media habits are. And so we can see that this is what's happening for her. She does not have a lot of time, and anyone who is a working parent can relate to this. She's more likely than her own mom to work. She needs to build her own village. So as people live farther away from their families, it's harder for them to get the support and help that they need, as it might be when they have family living nearby. And 61% of births to millennial moms are to unmarried women. Now, I just want to say about this stat, because we know that we're looking at non-traditional families, it's incredibly possible that 61% of these births are to millennial moms who have partners. They just may not be married to those partners. She hangs out online. She looks for expert advice on parenting websites. She does talk to her friends, which I think is great. We want to encourage social interaction between people. She looks at influencers, so that could be a part of your content strategy mix in thinking about who in your local or national area might be wise for you to partner with. She looks at mom blogs, at parenting apps, and then healthcare providers provide 22% of her resources of parenting related information. Now, I don't know if that means online or actually talking to a healthcare provider, but I challenge all of us on this webinar to make sure that number goes up, because that's where parents should be getting parenting information. They should be getting it from doctors and healthcare practitioners who truly understand pediatrics and truly understand how to take care of children and how to make important decisions about their healthcare. She's not hanging out on Tumblr and Twitter anymore. I don't blame her. It's election season. She does spend some time on YouTube and Facebook. Her Instagram usage is high. I would bet this number has continued to rise since 2015. And she does spend a lot of time in parenting communities and on Pinterest. What does she care about? Money, money, money. So that's important to her. She wants to know about money. And so insurance and how you cover patients is a big part of what she's going to want to know. She wants to know about relevance to her child's life stages. So anybody who's a parent knows that like every 6 months, these kids change on you and they continue to change on you constantly. It's like just when you think you had it under control, they change. So she's really going to be constantly researching about her kids and their development. She likes humor. So that's a great slide and research and data to bring to your stakeholders and say, hey, these moms like us to be funny. They want us to give them a lighthearted approach when the situation is appropriate. Obviously not when the child has just been diagnosed with leukemia. That's not a good time to be funny. What creative catches her eye? So this is a really great thing to look at. And remember, we talked about how pictures orient people. I'm in the right place. I'm on the right page. So she wants to see pictures of moms holding their babies and families. She wants to look at a baby. She likes children, but running on the beach and leading a meeting, probably not that interesting to her. Now, just from a neuroscience perspective, all human beings respond to faces more than they respond to other things. Women in particularly respond to faces. In fact, when they did studies on baby boys and baby boys are very interested in their environment, and baby girls really zero in on faces. So an important thing to think about if you're designing content for that mom. So to sum up, what's she looking for? She's looking for safety and trust, obviously really important to her. Consumerism, how easy is it for me to make an appointment? How easy is it for me to pay my bill, change my appointment? This generation started analog and grew up digital, and they want convenience. They want to be able to deal with their healthcare very similarly to how they buy a car or make a plane ticket. And we need to think about that digital front door and how to make the experience with her feel more convenient. She wants that meaningful relationship. Remember, she doesn't necessarily have her village in the same place where she lives, and she wants to know that there's a brand that she can count on. And again, she wants that cost transparency and insurance information. Let's talk about the LGBTQ community, because they are a parenting community. 4.3% of adults in the US identify as part of that community. So there are 10.7 million adults in the US. Between 2 million and 3.7 million children under age 18 have a parent from that community. 200,000 of them are being raised by a same-sex couple. So I just want to say that this is a very important community to address. If you're a part of a geographical area in the country where this is not a community where you find that this community lives, that's an important thing for you to think about. This audience may not be a part of your content strategy as much as other geographical parts of the country. So just something to think about when you're thinking about how to approach non-traditional families. Again, we saw that a lot of women are single, they may or may not have a partner, but I think it's important for us to recognize that we need to be sensitive to this community, but we also need to remember that they may not be a part of your audience depending on where your healthcare organization is. You can find a lot of research on how this community wants to be spoken to in the healthcare space. And there are a whole bunch of links and sources at the end of the webinar that you can use to look at this information. But there's a great report that I found on old language and then recommended updates. So for example, mother and father should turn into parent and guardian. Nursing mom, currently nursing. So there are sources and resources out there for you that you can find if you are developing content for these communities. Again, myths about same-sex parented families. So this is a great thing to read when you are preparing this content. What do people think about them? Here we go. Gay families only live in inner city locations. That is not necessarily the truth. So again, thinking about the mix of your content is an important thing to address, and reading this information and researching these audiences is very important. There's a lot of fantastic blogs from this community. They talk about all different kinds of things that affect their lives differently than maybe heteronormative couples, which are just the classic man and woman. So they can give you a lot of inspiration and a lot of different ideas about how to approach them when you're developing your content. This was a great infographic that I found about how to talk to children about gender, and particularly when these are big topics right now for kids, for that Gen Z generation. So doing that research and figuring out how you want to approach your audience is the first step in any fantastic content development. So we want to remember that there are biases. We want to recognize that not every family looks the same. And quite frankly, I don't think that this is just true for the LGBTQ community. I think it's true for everyone. Everybody wants to see themselves represented in media, and we're seeing that change. So it's an important thing for us to recognize for all of our content, not just content that we're creating for the LGBTQ community. We want to use that inclusive language, so there are definitely resources out there to find that. And I think that when you're developing that content, you want to look for blogs that come from that community's point of view, so you can roll those ideas into your content. Let's talk about Gen Z. So they were born between 1996 and 2010. 81% of them reported that they had checked for online health information. If you remember the Pew report that was done quite a long time ago, that's just in line with the 80% of all Americans who look for healthcare online. 70% were very likely to search the internet for information on health, and 59% sought online information for their family's health. So what that tells you is that they are looking at content that is not just for themselves, but they are also looking either for their parents or their siblings. And so we need to think about them when we're thinking about the content mix. There's a lot of really fantastic information about preparing for a scoliosis surgery. You can see here, that's something that kids may tackle. There are some great videos from some children's hospitals that do a great job of showing this information. Cincinnati does a great job of this particularly rare disease. They talk about a patient's story. They educate patients about the disease. They show a picture. It's from her own words. A really great way to create content for this audience. I think Chalk just does this perfectly on this page. They do all the elements that we talked about. They educate patients with the scoliosis surgery paragraph here. They show that patient's story to improve trust. They tell you what to expect with the actionable information that people are looking for. And then again, they build that trust because they talk about real families and parents that want to talk about how their children experience scoliosis surgery. So kids and teens want a mix of content formats and channels, and we're going to talk about the channels at the end. I think one of the really great things that you can do is have a teen or a kid tell their story, because I think that that makes a big impact on kids and teens. One of the things that doctors talk about is that they want to get on a patient's eye level when they're communicating with a patient. They never want it to feel like they're talking down to patients when they're actually talking to them, which is a great prompt when they're saying to you, why does this content sound so conversational? Well, Dr. Smith, you know, think about the way you actually talk to people in your office. This is not the New England Journal of Medicine. So when we talk about eye level, we want to make sure that this is something we're really thinking about when we're preparing content for kids and teens. We want to use plain English. We want to respect where they are at their educational level, and we want to make sure that we're talking to them and not at them or down at them. Okay, now we want to talk about grandparents. So let's talk about grandparents and who they are as part of your audience mix. So 83% of Americans aged 65 and older have grandchildren. 7 million grandparents live with a grandchild. So I thought that was really interesting. 37% serve as the primary caregiver for that grandchild. And grandparents say it's worth waiting for. 25% say the best part of aging is grandchildren. I just want to be very clear here. When my children are misbehaving, I say to them, I just want to remind you that I'm in this for the grandchildren. So I totally understand why people say why it was worth waiting for. My mother says it was the greatest thing that ever happened to her. So here's some examples of content that you can create for grandparents. And the reason I think that this is an important audience, but an overlooked audience, is that we never think about the arrow going down. We always think that the sandwich generation is making healthcare decisions for their parents. But let's be honest, the baby boomers got digital. They figured it out, they're online. A lot of them are on Facebook sharing election information. I had to block some of them in my family. And so they get it, they're doing research, and the arrow can flow downwards. If parents have strong opinions and they have good relationships with their children, they're gonna say to them, you know, I found this content, I found this children's hospital, I found this information. So thinking about talking to them, I think is an untapped market and definitely worthwhile. I think that this is a great example from Tumors about taking care of your grandchildren while your children are away. A lot of grandparents do come and watch children either on the weekend when parents are away for an afternoon. And so preparing this kind of information for grandparents is a great way to talk to them about the things that they care about and the things that they need. So what do grandparents want? They're called custodial grandparents if they have legal custody. I thought that was interesting. They may want this emergency care information as they may not be the primary caregivers. And as you know, health information changes. So, I mean, I remember I have a sister who's 7 years older than me, and her baby was supposed to sleep on his side. And by the time I had a baby, you know, 10 years later, or even longer than that, my baby was supposed to sleep on her back. And my mom raised her babies to sleep on their stomachs. So grandparents definitely need some education about how healthcare has changed. I can just tell you my oldest is 17 and they didn't give them food until they were 6 months old. Now they're giving them food very early. So even in 17 years, healthcare information changes. And then the other thing that I think that's untapped that I couldn't find an example of is how to have conversation with your parents about changing mores. I know that when my parents are here and they are wonderful people, but outwardly there's a look of disapproval on their face about how I might be parenting versus the way that they parented. So I think that that is an example of content that you could create that would be very valuable for people about how to talk to your parents or how to talk to your kids about the differences in how generations look at different topics. Okay. Sorry, I just needed a drink. Of water. So we talked about we want to educate people, we want to build their trust, and we want to give them actionable information. And then we talked about all of our different audiences. Now let's talk about the kinds of content that are always going to work for you, that should always be a part of your mix. The first thing is patient stories. I think we all know this. 1 out of every 5 purchases is made on Amazon because of a testimonial. So you can imagine how much more important that is in the healthcare space. So we want to tell great stories and we want to show kids who were in these healthcare situations and they got out of them whole, or they're better, or they're still undergoing treatment. We pretty much cured cystic fibrosis in our generation. There are still people with certain kinds of cystic fibrosis who are not cured, but this is a massive medical development. And I think that Seattle Children's does a really great job here of talking about their research through the lens of a girl who benefited from it. Very often when we look at the main character in a hospital story, it's the doctor or the hospital or the staff of the hospital. And we always want to make the character of the story the person who the story is about. But in this particular case, I thought they did a really good job of making the research the main character and using Ellie to tell that story. And so I think that telling patient stories and using the business opportunities that you want, like talking about your research, talking about your staff, is great, but it should be filtered through a character that people can relate to. And in this case, it is Ellie. Children's Colorado does a beautiful job here of giving statistics. Like we said before, we build trust and decision-making when we show people numbers. 100% patient survival for transplants in 2019 and 2.1 months to wait. That is a fact that somebody will bite down on hard. That is a really valuable way, and I love the way that they pull it out. The orange numbers, it allows people to really feel like I'm in the right place. These people know what they're doing. They know what they're doing so much that they actually publish their data. Not all transplant centers publish their data. So that kind of thing is incredibly valuable, and it's always content that you want to try to have. Tumors does a really nice job of speaking to different audiences. So this is an article about being overweight or obesity. And you can see here that this is for kids. You see here up in the tabs here, this is for teens. And this article was written, you can see it was written by a doctor or somebody else, and the doctor's name is there. You can listen to it. They think about accessibility here. But there's all this information that's written for a kid or a teen, an adolescent, and then there are other articles that have to do with that. Now let's go to the same article, but this is for parents, you can see. So it's the same writer, but if you read the article, it's a little bit different. The tone changes. It's clearly more for a parent than it is for a teen. And what I really like that Tumors did here is that they actually give the parents the opportunity to look at the different articles that are written for that particular age group. And I think what's so fascinating about that is that when you look at the teens aren't given the parent articles and the kids articles because they don't really care. They want to read the information that they want to read. But the parents want to read how you talk to your kids about it. And I think that's a nice example of how usability and user experience plays into how you service up the best content you can. The next example I want to show you is something that I think we should all be trying to do more of. This is Sharon Maisel. She is the woman, part of the team that writes the books, What to Expect When You're Expecting. And she does a really nice job of giving a lot of different types of content in terms of the content mix and the stages that women are going through. So her audience is very, very clear. It's women who are trying to conceive, women who are pregnant, and women who are in what we're now calling the 4th trimester, those first 3 months after you have a baby. And so she is creating these small Instagram infographics, kind of, that really talk to the concerns of the parents and give them the information that they need so that they can feel comfortable about how they're taking care of their child. So a type of content mix that can work for you really well is the content mix where you're thinking about the stages of that particular audience's journey. We talk about this, unfortunately, with cancer. There's a big difference between somebody who is suspecting that there might be cancer versus recently diagnosed versus going through a first round of treatments versus dealing with a stage 4 diagnosis. And so there's a big difference between a woman who's trying to conceive, a woman who's pregnant, a woman who's had a baby. So thinking about those different stages of your audience and where they're at are critical towards creating a content mix that's going to work. I really love what Texas Children's did here. They did a phenomenal job. This is advice from parents with kids with blood cancers. So important for parents to hear from other parents, like, we made it, we got through it, we're okay. These are the things you need to know. Here, Family House, this is UCSF. They do a beautiful job also of showing where children go for long-term treatment, a lot of pictures, a lot of information about what people can expect when they're there. I love it when hospitals show off what the technology is going to look like to the kids. What to expect is such a huge part for people. What does it look like? What's it going to feel like? And so showing this video to your child and calming them down about what an MRI might be like is incredibly important. This is clearly not an MRI for an adult, although some adults might enjoy it, but I do think it's child-sized. And it's clear that this video does a good job of alleviating a child's anxiety about getting an MRI. Children's Hospital of St. Louis has this amazing virtual tour of their playrooms. You can see all the pictures down here, and you can actually, when you move it around, you can see the different spaces. And this just does a good job of preparing parents and children for what it's actually going to be like in the child life area and how this is really geared towards children. We've really thought about children and their needs. So what I would tell you is the advice that I've been giving for a long time, which is the Thanksgiving approach to content. The cheapest, easiest, most optimized way to create content is to have written content. But don't forget about the other types of content that you can create from that written content. You can have video content to support it. You can have Instagram content that takes people to links, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. You can build campaigns around certain topics and build different types of content mixes in order to get people interested. So the to-do list for content that I hope you take away and get inspired by is always using patient stories as much as possible when appropriate. Use numbers and context to build that trust. Create those clear to-dos and those action items. Again, like we said, people feel better when they have a plan. If you can gather advice from other parents in similar situations, that can be fantastic for people. Showcase visually how you support children and their families. So people want to see what it's actually going to look like. They want to see programs that you offer. They want to see medical devices that are sized for children. These are always really important things to them. And always start with a base. So if written content doesn't make sense, start with a video and break up that video and distribute small parts of it on social media. If an infographic makes sense because it's easier to show those ideas through pictures, do an infographic and split that up on social media. So just thinking about what's the primary thing that we're trying to say, what content format that is best for our audience, and then how can we build different types of content formats around that. Let's talk about the channels now, because I know how important this is. So the first thing is Facebook. So Facebook is used by everybody. The grandparents are on Facebook, as we talked about. Unfortunately, Facebook does not have great organic reach anymore, and I think everybody knows that, and they know they have to buy ads that are going to help them get their content seen. What we've seen is that if you create really great content and you distribute it and you're consistent in your publishing, people are going to continue to come back to your Facebook channels, not through ads, but because they like your pages and it shows up in your organic reach. So Facebook can be an incredibly effective channel for distribution. It is going to cost you money. You can still build a great audience there. Who do you reach when you're using Instagram? So you're definitely reaching the teens, the millennial parents, the Gen X parents. A lot of people say they've left Facebook and they're on Instagram because it's such a happier place. It really is this broad place where you can find a mix of content. It's not a great deep dive for content though. As we saw from the examples, it's quick, short bursts of content. You can buy a third-party app that allows you to link out to your articles. People just have to click the link in your bio, and then you can have these same exact pictures that you showed in your feed, and they can click on that and go to an article. It's a great, solid choice if you have a limited social media budget. I would experiment with different content, see how it works. Unfortunately, I see a lot of hospitals using Instagram to sort of show pictures of doctors and nurses and heart months, and it's not really used to necessarily draw patients in, and I think that it's a really underutilized channel for us that we could really be doing a better job of using. YouTube, obviously, you're going to reach almost everybody there. 73% of US adults use the channel. Excuse me, more parents engage with YouTube than cable. Everybody's talking about cutting the cord, right? Optimization is key though. If those videos are not well optimized, if the descriptions aren't good, if you haven't put in tags that really help people find them, they're sitting out there like a tree in the forest. So we want to make sure that we really optimize those videos the same way you would optimize a piece of written content. The other really nice thing about video, as we saw, is that it does show up immediately on Google search results. So that's an important thing to think about as well. Reach preteens and teens. Obviously, Snapchat is huge for this audience. Gen Z is on it like crazy. My kids use it constantly. They use it while I'm driving carpool. They're like, smile for a picture, mommy. I'm like, I'm driving. I cannot look at your picture. And they're constantly creating content on it, which isn't that interesting. It's just selfies. But there's definitely opportunities in the news channels and ways to engage this audience. My honest feeling about this is that if you feel like you've got your social media under control, this could be a place where you spend 10% of your time and your budget and experiment with it. If you feel like you have other lower hanging fruit to tackle first, like auditing your social media content, auditing your competitors, looking at what's happening in the marketplace in general, I think Snapchat is definitely something to dip your toe into if you feel like you've got things under control. But if you're still tackling Instagram and Facebook and making sure you have enough content for your audiences, then I think that it's not necessarily something you need to worry about. It's the same exact thing that I would say about TikTok. So we were just on the phone with a client, I think it was Tuesday, and she was asking me, do you think TikTok is really going to be the place to go? So I said to her, well, only 4% of marketers use TikTok, so it might be a valuable thing to again, you could be a first responder there. I don't know though, I'm not convinced. It's very playful and fun. I don't necessarily know that you're going to be able to deep dive into information in the way that people need. I think I would be more focused on Instagram and IGTV. There are private physicians who are making use of TikTok really well, but as you can see here, I'm going to play this video for you on TikTok, and you can remember the one that we looked at for eating disorders. It really doesn't tell people necessarily where to go next or what to do next, and I think that's kind of the important thing that we do as marketers. It's my mind, give me a sign. One more time. So find a doctor who listens to you is a great idea. Well, how do I get in touch with this doctor? Where is she? So just an interesting thing to think through in terms of, is it really going to get you closer to your business goals? Pinterest. So this is a great place to reach millennial parents. It can make you feel bad about yourself because they do these amazing projects and then yours completely falls flat. You can reach moms and dads. So I thought this was fascinating. 80% of US mothers and 38% of fathers are on it. They definitely use it for general health and parenting content. Tie your messaging to popular topics on the platform. And remember, you don't have to create so much content. You can create your own original content, but pinning and sharing is really where Pinterest is at. And that allows you to really make sure that you are getting the attention that you need. More than 14 million articles are pinned every day. So there's definitely an opportunity to push this millennial parent audience towards your content. To help you when you're thinking about your publishing mix and what channels are going to work for you, we have created this handy dandy infographic. Jessica is going to drop the link into the QA box, into the chat, so you'll be able to get it. And you are welcome to go there and download this infographic. We had a lot of fun putting it together, and we hope it will be useful to you and your teens to distribute this content. So I just want to say, to sum up, this webinar asks the question, is it all about the moms? And the bottom line is that it's not. It's all about the people who care about children and love children and want to see their families be successful and thrive, that want to see themselves represented in the media and the content that you create. And so I think it's important for us to remember that while moms are the lion's share of the audience, there are a lot of other people interacting with your content that can be a great source of driving traffic towards your content, sharing your content, and building towards your business goals. Here are the sources for all of the content that we pulled and shared. Again, I said I don't believe in flabby content, so I wanted you to be able to see where we got all the information from. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope it was valuable to you and your teams. And at this point, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that people may have. So access to the slide deck will be sent out to you in the email that follows the webinar, so you will definitely be able to get that.
We have a question now.
Sure, great.
Somebody wanted to know if you have any examples of organizations that are doing things that are very interesting on Pinterest or Instagram.
Yeah, so I think the gold standard for Instagram is the Cleveland Clinic. And I think that Utah is doing a really great job on Pinterest. Those are two examples of people that I see doing some good stuff. It was hard for me to find some examples, I'll be honest. I looked at a lot of pediatric hospitals, and I think that when Pinterest was really hot, people got on it, but then they didn't continue and they didn't keep pinning. And I think it is a place to think about if you're running campaigns really geared towards millennial moms. So any women's health services, maternity, pediatricians, primary care, there's a lot of great opportunity on that channel. Anyone else? I'd love to answer questions. All righty, well, oh, here, we just got one in. So somebody asked a really interesting question here. We have a lot of peds educational material on our website, such as Halloween safety, toilet training, sleep problems. Is this type of content better on our blog? We're not trying to be Google or WebMD on our system website. So nobody should be trying to be Google or WebMD on your website. That's why Google and WebMD exist. I think the more important thing is to pull people in through the search funnel and get them to the places that they're looking for. So for this type of educational material, a really great way to think about it is it's evergreen content that sits there. When seasonally these things come up, you could write a blog that sort of refreshes that educational content and point people to that evergreen content through links. So you're giving people fresh information, you're using your linking strategy for your search, and you're making sure that people know that other types of evergreen content exist. So for example, with sleep problems, there's a lot of information right now about sleep. It's huge, sleep hygiene. You could publish a couple of blogs about that and then send people to more evergreen content about sleep, as well as sending them to your sleep center. So that's an important thing to think through. The blog should always, in my opinion, prop up the service line or a particular doctor or healthcare practitioner.
We have another question, Ahava. Do you have any recommendations for data visualization on social media across multiple channels?
So do you mean a tool or how to best get that information across? You mean, I'm not sure 100% what that, but if you want to ask again, I'm more than happy to answer the question.
Another question is if you have an example of a website that has strong and easy calls to action.
I think a lot of them do, actually. I think there's a lot of good calls to action. I think the important thing is to give all the information to the people that they need up front. So if the only thing that they can do is call the call center, then I think it's pretty easy to just say, call the call center. The one thing I would tell you is that we know that we need to optimize for mobile. So if that's the call to action, then make sure that when people click on that link, it clicks to dial. So you always want to have ease of use. If there are a couple different calls to action, like downloading a piece of information, signing up for a newsletter, you need to tell people the value behind what they do when they do that. So if you're calling the call center, you want to make an appointment. If you want to download something, that's going to give people information like how to prepare your child for an MRI, you want to include in that call to action, learn how to prepare your child for an MRI, including these tips, and give 1 or 2 bullets. I would say 2 or 3 bullets. That way you're giving people a teaser about what's in it, and that encourages them to actually do the click, to actually complete the click. So I think that if you're writing calls to action that aren't just call, you want to sort of say to people, this is what you're going to get if you complete this call to action. If you're going to get our newsletter, you're going to receive monthly tips on sleep for your baby, feeding your child, making sure that they get enough physical activity, how to manage screens. So that gives those moms or those fathers or those whoever it is, grandparents, the ability to know, okay, this newsletter is going to be valuable to me because these are the topics I'm interested in.
We have another question. What about designations, awards, and certifications? How do we know what the audience really cares about? Sometimes it feels like it's just a jumble of information that people might gloss over.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. And there's a lot of great research. Wax Communications did some good research around what people really care about. I know there's also a lot of issues, like if you're going to buy that US News and World Report medallion, you're looking at 60 grand to license it, which is a lot of money that you could spend on better content. So I think that, picking the awards that people, that people care about, sort of the old good housekeeping seal, is really critical. And I think that, the way Utah Valley Pediatrics did it was really nice. Like they had one main one there, and then you could click on that and go to a page that show others. I also believe you need to weave them into your content. So when you're writing about content, you can say, make a claim, we're the best at this because we got this award. And then the other thing you can do is if you're putting it in video or Instagram or some sort of visual content, talk about what that award actually means. So an example of this is, we are considered the best in California. Well, what is, somebody understands, okay, that's the best in California, but we're designated by the Society for Thoracic Surgeons. Well, I don't really know what that really means. So if it's an award that might be more obscure, again, just think about that, connecting the dots. What does it mean to my audience that we got that award? And making sure that you put that up there in the front, and then take them to a page that talks more about awards and braid it into the copy. All right, we're at the end. Thank you so much. If you want to email me questions, Ahava at Aha Media Group. I'm on Twitter as well. I also am on Instagram at AhavaL, so there's a million different ways to reach me. and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope this was valuable to you. Again, like I said, thank you so much for all your hard work, for all of us parents, grandparents, lovers of children, and we appreciate everything that you do so much, and we hope we'll see you next time on the next webinar. Don't forget to complete that survey, and you will get an email that will give you the link to the recording of the webinar as well as the slides. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.